Hi, and welcome to the McTaggart Attack Podcast. I'm Kevin McTaggart, the host of the podcast. Thank you so much for downloading the podcast today. I appreciate it. If you could please do me a favor and subscribe, share, and review the podcast wherever you listen to it, whether it be on YouTube or any of the other places where podcasts are listened to. Because the more subscribes, the more likes, the more reviews that my podcast gets, the more popular it gets, the more it gets out to people more. So right now I have like 11 reviews on Apple Podcasts, and I'd like more than that. So any help in that regard would be appreciated. And if you have a podcast, and if you want me to write a review about your podcast, let me know what your podcast is, and I'll listen to it, and I'll write you a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. I have no shame. Plus, I listen to a lot of podcasts. So, there. And I wanted to talk about something today because it's been on my mind, and I asked a question like this earlier on my Facebook page, and as if you may or may not be aware, if you're listening to this podcast for the first time, first of all, thank you. Second of all, one thing that I do listen to podcasts. I listen to a lot of like self-help and entrepreneur podcasts, and ones like Gary V or David Meltzer and Ed Milet, stuff like that. And like they're all entrepreneurs, and I've heard this a couple times about like how to know, if you're an entrepreneur, if you want to be an entrepreneur, and you're not sure what you want to be an entrepreneur in, ask people that you know, what are you good at? So I'm asking you, dear listener, to please comment in a review or however, send me a message, email me, McTaggartAttack@gmail.com. Tell me what I'm good at. Because I try to think about it, and it's like, yes, there's comedy, and, people have suggested comedy. Like, people like my rants about things. People think I'm entertaining. And that certainly is something I'm considering entrepreneur-wise. But I'm just trying to figure out if there's something else. I feel like there's something there that I could be good at entrepreneur-wise in addition to comedy. I could do both, because one thing I've learned about entrepreneurs is that you need like multiple income streams. Like 6 or 7 income streams. So like comedy could fit some of those income streams, but I'd be open to as many income streams as possible. But I just feel like there's something on the tip of my tongue that I'd be good at. No, I'm not talking about an OnlyFans page. I've tried that. I don't want to try that. I feel too awkward trying that shit. So that's not what I'm talking about. Yes, there are probably horny guys on the internet that would love pictures of me, but we're not going to go there. And I really shouldn't have said that for this podcast. And I apologize to anyone who's just been scarred for life. Anyway, I just feel like, what am I good at? Like, I'm loyal. I'm punctual. I like creating Excel spreadsheets. I like doing stuff like that with data and things like Excel spreadsheets. I tried to do a Fiverr gig a few years ago, creating Excel spreadsheets for people, but I didn't really put too much of an effort into that. But that's not really something that I don't think would make a lot of money, But I mean, there's something that I could do. Like I know I'm on social media a lot, and I could write like witty social media posts for businesses and such. That's something that I could do. And again, that's comedy related as well. And then I'm not saying I don't want to do comedy related stuff, but I certainly am thinking about that. And somebody suggested podcasts, and I'm like, yeah, I have this podcast, and it's great. And everybody who seems to listen to this podcast seems to like the podcast. I just need a lot more people to like the podcast. So if you're one of those people who has a podcast and wants, interviews on your podcast, come reach out to me and I will be a guest on your podcast. I'll be a guest on your podcast. And you can be a guest on my podcast. I guess, sort of. Even though I've never officially had guests on my podcast, I do have a good idea that I've run by some people as to how I would do interviews on my podcast. Because I don't want to just do interviews on my podcast just to bring attention to the podcast. If I'm going to interview you, it's going to be on my terms, and because I think it would be funny and entertaining for the podcast, and maybe informational. Who knows? But that's why I would have guests. I don't want to, I'm a big believer in the reasons you do something better be good reasons. And having guests on your podcast just to get attention to your podcast isn't a good reason to me. This podcast has always been a solo podcast. And I love the fact that it's a one-person monologue podcast. I love that. And I don't want to do anything to jeopardize this being a one-person solo podcast. But if I do an interview or two a week, I think that would still be good. And if I do it in the way that I think I want to do it, I think it would be entertaining for people. But seriously, what the fuck am I good at? I mean, there's comedy. There's writing funny stuff for either businesses or other comedians or somebody or anything. There's someone has approached me about punching up a book that they're writing, but I haven't heard from them in a few months, so I don't know if that's going to happen anymore. Because they're behind on the book, and I think everybody's behind on everything nowadays, thanks to Corona COVID-19 Palooza-a-thon. But what am I good at? I'm trying to figure that out. I did get a good suggestion earlier yesterday, I think, and they said that I'm good at seeing both sides of a situation. And that is a good quality to have. But how could I make that a business? How could I make that an income stream? And there was another one that I saw earlier today that I thought was a good one too, that might have been along the same lines. And I'm trying to pull it up now in case you can't tell. And this person said, because I don't want to reveal anybody's names, connecting with people and getting across a point. Connecting with people and getting across a point. That would be interesting. That would be like advertising, maybe? Marketing somehow? I don't have any marketing experience, really, but I do think I am good at connecting with people. communicating with people. I think I am good at seeing both sides of a situation, and I'm just not sure what business skill that would be good for. If I'm missing something, like I said, email me, McTaggartAttack@gmail.com, and give me some inspirational words on how I could turn these skills into some sort of entrepreneurship, like a consulting firm, or consulting business, or advertising business, or I know that there's like people who try to connect people to work together. There's a business in that. There's a money making in that. That might be interesting. These are things worth looking into. But the point of it is, if you think, based on, if you've heard my podcast and you know, think you know me enough on this podcast, if you want to go ahead and send me a message and let me know, what do you think I'm good at? And I'll bring it up on the show. And also, if you want me to be interviewed on your podcast, I would love to be a guest on your podcast. And people have wanted to be a guest on my podcast, and I guess I should let them know. So, let's collaborate. Or something. I don't know. But yeah, I don't want my job anymore. I know that. I'm working from home. It's great. But I would rather work from home on something that I would really like to do instead of the job that I currently have. By the way, I want to revert back to my episode last week, my conifer experience. I forgot to mention that the director that I was complaining about actually ended up losing her job based on the phone call that I received from Conifer. I think, from what I'm told, that they called me and like 50-something other either current employees or former employees, and they all pretty much said the same thing. So someone wanted me to follow up with that. They wanted me to mention that, so I'm mentioning that now. In case you were wondering. And if there are any glaring omissions that I ever make in this podcast, please email me, McTaggartAttack@gmail.com. Glaring omissions, or what am I good at? Seriously, I know some things that I'm good at, but I feel like there's something I'm missing that I'm good at, but I can't figure that out. So if you can let me know what I'm good at. What am I good at will be the title of this podcast episode, and I would really appreciate any assistance in answering that question for me. Because it takes an outside perspective to view things like that, and that's important. And yeah, I think that's what I wanted to talk about in the podcast today. So yeah, let me know what I'm good at. And thank you for listening to the podcast today. Please be sure to subscribe, rate, and review the podcast wherever you listen to it, whether it be on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Like Anchor or Libsyn or Spreaker or Stitcher or Donner and Cupid and Donner and Blitzen, and I don't know what the fuck the other reindeer names are. And that's the bottom line. If you smell what the McTaggart Attack Podcast is cooking.